hand, we have the Fairly OddParents. This show has been a fairly, get it, big success with 10 seasons, and it's the show that I would watch every day after school. But I never regarded it as being dark. That was until I really took time to analyze it. So let's start off with the theme song. Timmy is an average kid that no one understands. Mom and Dad and Vicky always giving him commands. Bed, twerp. Right there, that suggests that Timmy is constantly being bossed around by his parents. And in the show, he's constantly abused by his sadistic babysitter, Vicky. She often degrades him and calls him names. Then it continues with doom and gloom up in his room. So Timmy's room isn't even a safe place for him to escape to. Now, Timmy then gets fairies, which makes his life relatively better. The Fairy Council claims that they grant fairies to the most miserable children on Earth, meaning that there are a bunch of depressed and abused children out there that feel ignored and mistreated by their parents. Moving on to number 9, we have SpongeBob. So I know I already talked about everyone's favorite little yellow sponge before, but I want to go into more detail this time. This show isn't just about a silly little sponge and his daily adventures. It shows characters dealing with depression, anxiety, and mania, and even addresses issues like greed, suicide, and vengeance. Let's take a look at one of the episodes titled One Course Meal. In this episode, Mr. Krabs discovers that Plankton is terrified of whales, and then he uses this to his advantage to torture him. It is revealed that Plankton's ancestors were killed by whales. Now, Mr. Krabs tortures Plankton so much that he actually tries to commit suicide. We see him lay down in the middle of the road waiting for a bus to run him over. Or how about the episode where SpongeBob believes he kills the health inspector and then him and Mr. Krabs struggle to try and hide his body from the cops? Definitely darker than a bunch of us realized. In our 8th spot, we have Phineas and Ferb, a goofy little show about two inventor brothers and their super agent pet, Platypus Perry. So in the show, Candace is always trying to get her brothers in trouble by trying to get her parents to witness their inventions, but she never succeeds. Well, it makes her seem like she's a pathological liar. Then in season 1, episode 45, she finally succeeds and her parents catch Phineas and Ferb in the act. As a result, they get sent to reformatory school. Now, this is when the show takes a very dark turn. At this school, the brothers get their imaginations forcibly removed from them. They go through this very disturbing brainwashing process where you see this machine strapped to their head, basically sucking the life out of them. Then we see that they're strapped down with their eyes forced open as they watch this show about how imagination is morally wrong. The worst part, this whole episode was a dark metaphor for growing up. Coming in our 7th spot, we have the Rugrats. This show revolves around 4 babies, Tommy, Chucky, and the twins Phil and Lil. And of course, Angelica, their older cousin that often likes to terrorize them. In fact, she is famous for screaming, "You stupid babies." Meanwhile, the adults are completely clueless. Well, that's great. The babies have a verbally abusive cousin, but I'm not going to focus on that. There was one episode that made the show take a very sad and dark turn. This episode was titled Mother's Day and reveals what happened to Chucky's mom. In the episode, everyone has a mom for Mother's Day except for Chucky. Then it's revealed that his mom died from an unexpected terminal illness shortly after his birth. It's an extremely heartbreaking episode. And then also in the episode, Chucky's father reads a poem that Chucky's mom wrote for him while in the hospital. Like, ugh, just rip my heart out there. Poor Chucky. In our 6th spot, we have Care Bears. Yes, I know this one is going to be hard to believe. How are friendly and cute looking rainbow bears scary? Well, I'll tell you how. So the show has something called a caring meter. Basically, this meter tells when kids are unhappy or misbehaving, meaning that they are constantly monitoring everything that every single kid does. Creepy. Then what's worse is that they appear to the child and force them to change their attitude. And then they also give them a nice, big, long hug to ensure that they act in accordance to their preconceived notion. Basically, these bears are dictating the kids on how they need to act and feel, stripping away their own personality and forcing a new one on them. Like, they're doing more harm than good by trying to protect these kids from ever feeling sadness. Then people also drew a connection between the Care Bears and the cult recruitment technique called love bombing. Basically, this involves showering recruits with attention and affection to entice them into the cult. Oh, doesn't that sound an awful lot like the Care Bears hug and tactics? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Ed, and Eddie. This show follows the lives of 3 boys, all with basically the same name, but with completely different personalities. It's sad, but if you rewatch the show, it's clear to see that each Ed suffers from a different kind of abuse. Let's start off with Ed with 1D. Ed lives in an abusive house. He lives in the dark basement in a really messy room. But his sister's room is clean and filled with nicer items, showing parental favoritism. Ed also has bad personal hygiene. It's as if his parents don't care for his own health or hygiene. Then in one episode, you can hear someone screaming in the background. Ed then says, "Dad's home." Okay, that literally makes it seem like his dad abuses others and he's just used to hearing them scream and cry in pain. Then lastly, in one episode, Eddie tries to break Ed out of his house when they realize that the stairs are gone, meaning his parents physically removed the stairs so that he had no way to get out of the basement. That's dark. Now, let's move on to Double D Ed. His abuse is more in the form of neglect. His parents are hardly ever home, so they communicate to him through sticky notes. But the notes are often outrageous, like, "Please wash the phone." Not a typical chore, at least not in my household. It makes it seem like his mom may be struggling with personal issues. Then it also seems like Ed is given a bunch of chores to do as if he's a servant and not their son. And lastly, we have Eddie. In the series finale, we saw Eddie being physically and verbally abused by his older brother. So the characters do suffer from a much darker life than we thought. In our 4th spot, we have Braceface. Does anyone else remember the show? If not, Braceface is a Canadian cartoon that surrounds the 14-year-old girl Sharon Spitz and her struggles of growing up. Sharon was actually voiced by Alicia Silverstone for the first 2 seasons. Now, Braceface has dealt with much more serious issues on the show, such as peer pressure, body image issues, and even underage drinking. So let's take a look at that last one. In season 1, episode 13, Sharon and her friend Maria go to Miami to visit Sharon's dad. During this trip, Sharon and Maria are invited to go to a party by a friend of her dad's band. At the party, this guy offers both the minors a rum and coke. That's right, they mention that in a kids show. After insisting that they drink, Sharon gives into the pressure and has some. Then you see Sharon continue drinking and has 5 more. With the alcohol in her system, she starts to dance and actually shakes her tushy for all the guys to see. Then she ends up back at the hotel where she vomits. And her dad gives her this big long lecture about underage drinking. I mean, I personally haven't seen a kid or tween show tackle dark issues like that. Moving on to number 3, we have Sesame Street. Yes, I know I've done videos on Sesame Street before, but those are all just made up theories. Now it's time to look at actual facts from episodes. So Sesame Street over the years has tackled serious issues like death, disease, divorce, and gender inequality. Recently, they have introduced a new character named Carly, whose mother is a drug addict. As a result, she lives in foster care. Carly is supposed to highlight the serious impact that a drug addiction can have on a family and a young child. Sesame Street also claims that it's a way to help break the stigma and to help show kids that they're not alone. Then we also have the character named Alex, whose father is in jail. And we have Lily, a 7-year-old Muppet whose family suffers from food insecurity and homelessness. Sesame Street is just filled with hard-hitting issues. In our 2nd spot, we have The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. A classic show that is very well written and actually hilarious, and I still enjoy watching it to this day. So there are 2 main episodes that I want to discuss. The first one being the episode titled Health and Fitness, which was season 2, episode 34. In this episode, London and Maddie go to extreme measures to make sure their bodies look perfect for a fashion show. London is shown trying to lose an extreme amount of weight, whereas Maddie thinks that she needs to gain weight. This episode tackles the eating disorders, anorexia, and bulimia. But as a kid, it went right over our heads. London ends up starving herself to the point where she's super dizzy, and Maddie has digestive issues after binge eating all day. Now, the next episode I want to talk about is titled Poor Little Rich Girl, and it's from season 1, episode 13. In this episode, we find the very upsetting truth about London's childhood. So basically, in this episode, London's father goes broke, and as a result, London loses her place and has to live with Maddie. That's only temporary though, he's still rich, don't worry. While at Maddie's, she says she didn't realize that families actually sat down and ate meals together. She said that her parents would often go out to restaurants and would leave her home with a nanny. But the nannies never spoke English. so she was often alone with no one to talk to. Also, the nanny was never the same, so it's not like she could have formed a bond with them. It's almost like having a new stranger in your house every day. Then in the episode, London fails at her attempt to try and cook. Well, it's because no one taught her how to cook. Then she also says that every weekend she was stuck flying back and forth between her mom and dad, so she didn't really have a good childhood. Side note, the episode about the ghost in Suite 613 would always scare me as a kid. Do any of you guys know what I'm talking about? Let me know in the comments below. And in our #1 spot, we have Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold was an American animated series that aired on Nickelodeon from 1996 to 2004. In the show, there's a character named Helga who is considered a big bully. She often picks on and teases other kids, especially Arnold. Well, in season 4, episode 34, titled Helga on the Couch, the audience finally learned the sad truth to why Helga acts the way that she does. While talking to a child psychologist, Helga reveals that she was severely neglected as a child. Her parents mainly focused on her perfect older sister. She tells the psychologist stories like how her mom left her winter coat at the dry cleaners, and so she had to walk to school in the freezing cold in the middle of winter without one. It also implies that her mother suffers from alcohol abuse. Then it is also revealed that one time her mother packed her lunch with only a few crackers, moist towelettes, and a can of shaving cream. And when she was just 3 years old, Helga would have to walk to school by herself in the rain because her parents were too focused on her sister and forgot to take her to school. That's an extremely sad backstory.
Starting us off with number 10 is Erie, Indiana, almost like a precursor to Stranger Things, which I also have not watched. Either way, this early 90s series starred Hocus Pocus actor Omri Katz as Marshall Teller, a teenager whose family moves to desolate Erie, Indiana, where the population was only 16,661, where a seemingly normal small town was never what it appeared to be. From school nurses that administer eye tests that brainwash students to ghosts coming back from the dead and eerie time travel, this show was way before its time. The worst part, this show aired on Saturday mornings. What a way to kick off the weekend. Coming in at number 9 now, we have Ghostwriter, produced by the Sesame Workshop, the group behind Sesame Street and the Electric Company. Yes, you just heard that right, the producers of Sesame Street. Now, this show was about a group of friends living in Brooklyn who solve mysteries and crimes through their use of words in literature. They say words can't hurt. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Clearly, they will. This group will hurt you with their words. Intended to make children love reading and writing, the supernatural catch was that the young sleuths were aided by a ghost. That doesn't mean the show didn't have creepy episodes, it definitely did. Do you remember that nightmare-inducing character of Gooey Gus? It was just like a toxic Avenger-looking purple monster that spit slime into the mouths of the kids, which I feel like should be illegal in some capacity. Writer Kermit Frazier revealed that Ghostwriter's true identity was that of a runaway slave during the Civil War who was killed by his owners. Talk about very morbid and very racist. Now at number 8 we have Freaky Stories, a sort of Twilight Zone for kids. This animated show consisted of a series of 5-minute shorts of different animation and art styles that revolved around campfire stories and urban legends, which kind of sounds exactly what our channel is. Interesting. They range from original stories to well-known legends like the killer in the back seat, the hook man, or the babysitter and the man upstairs, which influenced the movies Black Christmas and When a Stranger Calls. It's so funny, I know for a fact every single person watching this knows those 3 stories, or a variation of them at least. I think the weirdest part for me was the hosts of the show, a slimy maggot and a blue cockroach looking thing. Each story had some sort of message or moral at the end, with several episodes devoted to characters committing crimes and paying dearly for them. Like an episode about a guy who tries to steal gas from an RV but instead hooks up to the septic tank and gets a nasty surprise. Each episode begins and ends with the phrase, "This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine." That's actually quite funny. But either way, that also made the episodes all the more ominous for the kids. Coming in hot at number 7, we have Animorphs. Now you guys all absolutely had an older sibling who was all like, Animorphs is a big kids show, which is exactly why you wanted to watch it. We've all been there. My sisters did not watch this, but I feel like I was there. No, it's about 5 kids who are given the power to morph into any creature they wish to help them fight villainous Visa 3 and his fellow Yeerks, a breed of parasitic aliens threatening Earth. Maybe it was a morphing into an animal that tripped me out, or the fact that the plot was super heavy for the fan base it was created for, but either way, very, very creepy. Coming in at number 6, we have the Demon Headmaster. If the title alone isn't unsettling enough, the plot definitely is. The original series ran between 1996 to 98, 2008 and starred Terrence Hardiman as the horrifying head. Back then, it followed a girl called Dina Glass who notices something strange about the school she attends with her foster brothers. The demon headmaster rules his school with his sea green eyes through which he hypnotizes the pupils. Kinda sounds like some of the Salvatore brothers on The Vampire Diaries. Love that. When Dina arrives, she sets up Splat, a group designed to protect the pupils from the head's paranormal powers and to break his dictatorship. They were talking about a reboot last year, but the story has changed a little bit. Has anyone dared to watch? I certainly haven't. Coming in at number 5, we have The Secret Worlds of Alex Max, starring Alyssa Olenek, a teenage girl with a normal life until she's doused with a chemical that gives her abilities, including but not limited to shooting electricity from her fingers and liquefying into a mobile puddle. That's a fun skill. Wish I could turn into a puddle sometimes and I'm highly embarrassed. The near accident that involved a chemical plant's truck spilling on her could have easily made her into a Marvel character, and the show did have the sense of wavering between being a superhero show, but it wasn't. It was terrifying alone that she could just liquefy. On cue, liquefy. At number 4 now, we have Gogs. From 1993, Gogs revolves around a family clan of dumb, primitive, and socially inept cavemen in a fantasy prehistoric Stone Age setting and contain much dark comedy, various toilet humor-based gags, and gross-out situations, like the cavemen losing control of their bodily functions. Here's the thing, this show wasn't as terrifying in terms of plot as some of the others on the list, but everything about it was absolutely beyond cringeworthy, and you can imagine your little 8-year-old self watching this with little context and thinking, what the hell? The sound effects alone just still haunt me. I mean, not still, when I YouTubed it this morning. Coming in at number 3, we have Tales from the Crypt/Crypt Keeper. This popular TV series was directed towards people of all ages. It frightened both young and old alike, with the famed Crypt Keeper who was just humorous enough to make you think that the show might not be too scary after all, but still creepy enough to make your skin crawl, and he also made the introductions and closing comments for each segment with witty puns that really did have a dark humor about them. I'm not gonna lie, you did well. You creep. The show brought some big time celebrities on board throughout its 7-year run. Being so popular, HBO subsequently came out with Tales from the Crypt Keeper, and having the show as a cartoon and toned down a bit still didn't totally make the whole idea less scary. Despite the show's light-hearted spin, episodes include tales about what would happen if you cry wolf, encounters with monsters, and getting sucked into a gravesite, all of which I would not want to experience myself. And I don't wish it upon any of you either, my lovely precious subscribers. Filling our number 2 slot is Goosebumps. It was a tough choice making this number 2 because it is arguably the most famous of all creepy kids shows from this era, and whether you read the books that the TV show was based on or not, Goosebumps was bound to give you nightmares if you watched it as a kid. I read so many of the books growing up and I absolutely loved them. They did scare me a little bit. If I was reading them home alone, I'm like, oh, is the dummy gonna come get me? Is the dummy alive? You know the ones I'm talking about. Somehow this children's show was able to sneak things in that the children's shows of today wouldn't dare to do. From Slappy the living dummy terrorizing his owner to entire family basically dying on their trip to Horrorland, to an episode where a mask gets permanently stuck to a kid's face. Like, this is no joking matter. None of this is a joking matter at all. And finally, coming in at number 1 is Are You Afraid of the Dark? It is not a question, it is in fact the name of the show, and it tops this list because it preceded on number 2 and paved the way for creepy storytelling that would haunt everyone for years to come. Round of a slow applause. Now this show is a Canadian classic and it's centered around a group of storytellers who are just on the verge of entering their teen years. How exciting teen angst ensues. Now each would take turns telling the rest of the group the scariest stories they could muster while gathered around a campfire. This gave viewers an even eerier setting to kick off the creepy tales, and honestly I'm just getting creeped out thinking about it. It was extremely dark for younger viewers, but that didn't stop them from watching it. They ate that up. If you want to play a cruel Halloween joke on your friends, then have them watch some episodes like The Tale of Laughing in the Dark, The Tale of the Ghastly Grinner, and The Tale of Watcher's Woods. However, if you really want them to sleep with a nightlight on for the foreseeable future, have them check out The Tale of the Dead Man's Float. The crimson red corpse that rises from the depths of a pool looks like a poltergeist escapee.
At number 10, we have Pokemon. This show has been on TV for over 20 years. That's insane. There's over 1,000 episodes. The voice actors from the show must be making bank. But let's really look into what the show is about. Ash is like 10 years old and he leaves his home to become a Pokemon master, which he does, and that is really, really cool. But he's a homeless 10-year-old basically hitchhiking from town to town like a hobo with a gang of hobos. Kids shouldn't be living like that. Also, there's speculation that Ash's father was killed killed, and that's why you never see him in the show, and the show touches on death several times with more than one Pokemon moving on to the afterlife. At number 9, we have Kim Possible. She's a teen secret agent, and she's super cool. I feel like that's how the show was presented in the pitch meeting. Kim Possible is a great show. It has an ensemble of great characters, Kim always has inventive gadgets to save the day, and it has a roster of villains that give off some great comic book vibes. Now, if you break down the show for what it really is, it's a show about a girl who has to spend much of her time saving the world instead of being a girl. Like, forget about midterms, she has to stop Dr. Draken from taking all the world's gold or something, whatever. The amount of stress that is on this girl's shoulders must be insane. She probably has to take anxiety medication just to get through the day. In concept, the idea would be cool, but in practice, Kim Possible's life is probably a living hell. At number 8, we have Regular Show. This, again, is one of the best shows of all time. It's insanely weird and manages to pack in a boatload of references to 80s culture through movies, music, and video games. The show definitely tickles the nostalgia foot that we all have lodged inside our souls. That was a very weird sentence. But a character on the show has one of the most depressing existence. Skips. Skips is immortal. He's been alive for hundreds of years, and it looks like he will live for hundreds more, maybe even forever. But this means that everyone he has ever known has died. All of the friends that he has now will one day die, and he will have to keep moving on, watching them turn to dust. There's even an episode where it highlights Skip's old love and how close they were and how he will never see her again. That is so sad. Why do you gotta make me feel like that, Regular Show? You're making me feel like I'm watching a Pixar movie. Like, I dare you to watch the beginning scene from Up and not cry like a baby. At number 7, we have Pinky and the Brain. Okay, first off, the main goal of Brain is to take over the world, and I don't know what the world would look like if it was run by a super genius mouse, but I think it would involve a lot of human testing, and I don't really think I'm cut out for that life. But on top of that, Brain is one of the smartest creatures on the planet, and he is forced to live in a cage for most of his life. And on top of that, one of his best friends is kind of a doofus. I mean, I love Pinky, but if you're as smart as Brain, I don't think you would want to spend all of your time with a guy whose catchphrase is Narf. At number 6, we have Invader Sim. I mean, come on, this dude came here to take over our planet, and this little crazy green dude eats people. Not to mention the fact that he has all sorts of strange space chemicals, which he uses to conduct strange experiments, and he has a ton of weapons of mass destruction. This guy should be on America's most wanted list. He's one of the biggest criminals in cartoon history, right behind the Duke of Nuts. At number 5, we have My Life as a Teenage Robot. When I was a kid, I loved every show that would bring superpowers into a high school setting because I thought it would have been amazing to have powers. I mean, which kid doesn't dream of that? And My Life as a Teenage Robot captures this perfectly. A teenage girl that could blast her way through so many villains but would still need to make it back in time for history class. But the show touches on a lot of serious topics. I mean, the underlying theme of the whole show is that the main character is a robot in a school full of humans, and she constantly feels like an outcast. Also, they bring up issues with race and feminism and what it's like to have people think you are a certain way before they even get to know you. All in all, this is a great show, and going back when you're older to check out some of those darker tones make it even better. At number 4, we have Johnny Bravo, the slick Elvis-like beefcake that would spend his days trying to get in bed with whatever girl crossed his path. Now, this show is dark for a multitude of reasons. Let's start with the obvious. You could never make this show now, where some dude is chasing down women who have already told him that they have no interest in him. If that got passed as a kid's show today, every newspaper and tabloid would be talking about it, and the empire of keyboard warriors would unleash a blast from their Death Star that would send everyone involved into early retirement. But on top of that, I think there was only one episode where Johnny was actually successful in meeting someone. If there was more than one, correct me in the comments, but for the most part, he wants to meet someone, and he is constantly alone. He's one of the biggest failures in romantic TV history, and that's a pretty bleak existence. I mean, I don't approve of his tactics, but watching a guy strike out 1,000,000 times and go back to live with his mom is one of the most depressing love stories I have ever heard. At number 3, we have Avatar: The Last Airbender. Holy, this show is great. I'm partway through season 1 now, and apparently it just gets even better as it goes on. But definitely watching the show for the first time as an adult lets me see a lot of the darker themes. First off, there's a war going on with the Fire Nation attacking every other nation. People are constantly taken into slavery and killed, and all the world building creates a feeling of what it would be like to live during a time time of great suffering. Sure, the main characters are fun and lighthearted, but they have to face the horrors of war every day and they're only kids. Not to mention the main character Aang. Everyone he knew is dead because he was frozen for so long. Then you get into some of the darker types of bending like blood bending and you have some pretty grim episodes. But I have to say, all in all, that really adds a lot of value to the show because you feel like the characters are dealing with real problems. In fact, all of the shows on this list so far are definitely worth watching. At number 2, we have Courage the Cowardly Dog. I mean, if you've seen one episode of Courage, you will know what I'm talking about. You have a dog who is on the brink of a heart attack at all moments, and he is forced to go toe-to-toe with some monstrosities that would give Cthulhu a run for their money. The mental stress that Courage has to deal with would push any of us into a psychiatric ward. Forget about Kim Possible. Courage probably spends his mornings dry heaving from all the stress he's under. But if we go beyond the obvious, we have Eustace, the mean old man who's always terrible to Courage. But when we really look at it, this is animal abuse. Courage is the best good boy in town, and this mean old man just tears him down all the time. I honestly have a deep hatred in my heart for Eustace, and even though he's not real, I feel justified in hating him. And for the number 1 spot, we have Adventure Time. God, I love Adventure Time. This has to be one of the best shows of all time. It's insanely funny, and it builds a fantasy world of the likes I've never seen before. The way it forcefully plays with tropes and then brings in some fresh concepts is something that a lot of fantasy worlds fail to do. But if we look back on some episodes, we will quickly realize that the show is very dark. First off, it all takes place after a nuclear holocaust that killed probably millions of people. The Lich King is one of the most evil characters I have ever seen in a kids show. The way he works his way into Finn's soul and then torments him is on par with villains like Voldemort. Later into the series, it's revealed that the Ice King used to be a normal guy but slowly went insane, saving Marceline the Vampire Queen when she was just a little girl, and now she checks in on him to make sure he's keeping well, and every time she does, she's heartbroken because she remembers how he used to be. And that's not even all of it. I just don't have time to cover all the emotionally impactful topics this show covers.
Starting off this countdown, we have Angela Anaconda. Now, this was a Canadian-based cartoon, so I'm not sure if anyone outside of Canada got to experience this show. Lucky you if you didn't. But basically, the show's style is very creepy. It's like mixing real-life faces into the cartoon world. The human faces and bodies are all gray, but everything else is in color. So many people have commented on the show's style saying it creeped them out or gave them nightmares. And I can see why. Just the way that the characters move their lips and eyes are just, it's so creepy. And the opening theme song does not help their case. During this song, you see Angela sabotaging her rival and ends up dropping a heavy stage curtain on her. Angela is not a nice girl. She definitely has a dark side. In our 9th spot, we have Long Ago and Far Away. This show is basically a collection of stories for children. The show has a human narrator, but the stories themselves are animated. Each episode covers a different story. Some of the stories are quite messed up. Let's look at the one titled Rarge. In this episode, we learn about a world with strange-looking citizens, super intelligent babies, and a mayor with arms growing out of his head. In this episode, these weird babies learn that they are only alive in someone's dream. So they kidnap him and build a bridge so that they can cross over into the real world. The episode ends with the babies trapping the man in his own dreams forever. It's quite eerie and messed up. In our 8th spot, we have the Creepy Crawlers. This is a 1994 show that follows a kid named Chris Carter who worked in a magic shop. In the show, he designed a machine called the Magic Maker. One night, the machine ended up creating 3 weird mutant bug-type creatures. These creatures, alongside Chris, fight the evil characters. Now, the evil characters are pretty creepy, not gonna lie. First off, we have Spooky Goopy, who is a green skeletal monster with handcuffs for hands. I don't know how that works. Like, it seems useless. How could you, like, pick things up? I don't know. Then you have Shockroach, which is this nasty cockroach-like monster that can unleash swarms of cockroaches. You have Quirminator, which is a worm-type creature that has a mace at the end of its tail. And even Spider Patrol, a brown-haired creepy humanoid spider monster. Honestly, they don't make characters like that anymore.
Number 7, the hilarious House of Frightenstein. Over in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, back in the 1970s, a group of writers thought about pitching a horror-themed comedy show for kids. The result was the hilarious House of Frightenstein. The show had a wide range of segments. They would vary from educational, music, jokes, some of the worst special effects I've ever seen in my life. The show was pitched as an extremely cheesy take on B-list horror movies crossed between some elements from a talk show, and boy did they ever nail it. It sounds very bizarre, but it was actually a big hit, recording 130 episodes, and it even starred one of the creepiest men in history, Vincent Price. The thing that made the show such a huge success wasn't the unorthodox approach to edutainment, but it was the airing schedule. The show would air twice a day, once in the morning so it could catch kids before they went to school, and once during late night so it could catch stoners who wanted to watch something weird.
In our sixth spot, we have Care Bears. Yes, I know this one is going to be hard to believe. How are friendly and cute looking rainbow bears scary? Well, I'll tell you how. So the show has something called a caring meter. Basically, this meter tells when kids are unhappy or misbehaving, meaning that they are constantly monitoring everything that every single kid does. Creepy. Then what's worse is that they appear to the child and force them to change their attitude. And then they also give them a nice, big, long hug to ensure that they act in accordance to their preconceived notion. Basically, these bears are dictating the kids on how they need to act and feel, stripping away their own personality and forcing a new one on them. Like, they're doing more harm than good by trying to protect these kids from ever feeling sadness. Then people also drew a connection between the Care Bears and the cult recruitment technique called love bombing. Basically, this involves showering recruits with attention and affection to entice them into the cult. Oh, doesn't that sound an awful lot like the Care Bears hug and tactics? We're now at our fifth and halfway mark with Scooby-Doo, my favorite cartoon of all time. But I had to put it on the list just because some episodes actually gave me the creeps. So I'm sure we all know about Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and of course Scooby-Dooby-Doo, my favorite group of meddling kids that solve mysteries. Some of the villains are pretty creepy. Like the episode titled Vampire Bats and Scary Cats, where the team visits Daphne's friend Lisa and they encounter a vampire. The vampire ends up turning Lisa into one as well. When this happens, she turns and looks directly into the camera and growls. Just the image of her scary vampire face is just ingrained in my mind forever. Then you have the episode with the ghost clown, who, again, looks very creepy, and hypnotizes Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne to all do dangerous circus acts. I didn't think that they could make clowns any scarier until this one came along and manipulates and hypnotizes people. How about the episode with the phantom green ghosts and their terrifying cackly laugh? Later on in the episode, the crew finds 5 coffins, with one shaped like a dog. When they open them, it reveals some of the characters unconscious in there. I think the scariest thing is how whenever they make a ghost or monster appear, it's always like a POV zoom effect style. So it shows the monster closing in on you as they directly stare right at you. And lastly, we have the episode where the gang visits a sanatorium with a crazed doctor character with green glowing eyes. In the episode, you can literally see dead bodies under a sheet being brought in and out. Although they weren't real bodies in the end, it's still not kid-friendly. In our fourth spot, we have The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. This show is pretty funny, not gonna lie, but it's also filled with moments that will make you feel pretty uncomfortable. For starters, they have countless creepy characters like the Candy Wife that looks like a disturbing rag doll, or Teehee Tummy Tums and his family. They all look like they belong to the movie The Orphanage since they all wear a sack over their face. Now, let's look at some of the creepy episodes. You got the episode titled Knuckles is a Dirty Rat, where you see the very detailed and gross plague-infested citizens. Or the episode Who Let the Cat Out of the Old Bag's House, where you see one of her cats has empty eye sockets and sharp teeth. And we see an extreme close-up of this face multiple times. And lastly, in the episode titled Teehee Tummy Tums, Flapjack has a nightmare about the Comb King. It's weird because the Comb King is stop-motion animated, so that alone is pretty jarring. But in the episode, he gives Flapjack a special comb, then says in a menacing voice, "You'll need it to get the bugs out of your hair." Then we see bugs crawling all over his face while he panics. The Comb King laughs evilly and we see that he has sharp, comb-like teeth. In our third spot, we have The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Y'all really wanted this show to be featured on my next countdown, so here you have it. This show features Billy and Mandy and their new BFF, the Grim Reaper. Basically, they won a limbo contest and the Grim Reaper is forced to be their friend, go on adventures with them, and do chores for them, and so on. Now, this show is known to be a dark comedy. Nonetheless, there are still some creepy moments in the show. In season 2, there's this creepy scene involving Jeff the Spider where he literally is snapping his sharp teeth and keeps saying, "Love me, Dad, love me now." It's really creepy. In the episode titled Nursery Crimes, Billy is cast as Humpty Dumpty, but he falls to his death, shatters, and his remains are eaten by all the king's horses and men and villagers for days. In the same episode, a creepy Pinocchio tries to eat Billy's flesh. And lastly, in the episode titled Attack of the Clowns, Grimm tries to bring to life a creepy clown head to try and get Billy over his fear of clowns. Well, this creepy clown comes to life and drags itself along the floor and then tries to devour them.
Number 2. Goosebumps. I don't know what kind of childhood you had if you never heard of Goosebumps. It's the insanely popular book series that got turned into a kids show that would take each one of the books and transform them into a live action episode. Looking back, most of them were pretty cheesy, but as a kid, I could barely watch the intro. One of my favorites was the Mudman. This creature would come alive when it rained and then would harden in the sun. His weakness was literally dehydration. Even though every episode of this show is pretty tame now, the idea of putting a Halloween mask on that you can never take off was a real concern of mine when I was 9. Nowadays, I'm only afraid of my tax return.
And in our number 1 spot, we have Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold was an American animated series that aired on Nickelodeon from 1996 to 2004. In the show, there's a character named Helga who is considered a big bully. She often picks on and teases other kids, especially Arnold. Well, in season 4, episode 34, titled Helga on the Couch, the audience finally learned the sad truth to why Helga acts the way that she does. While talking to a child psychologist, Helga reveals that she was severely neglected as a child. Her parents mainly focused on her perfect older sister. She tells the psychologist stories like how her mom left her winter coat at the dry cleaners, and so she had to walk to school in the freezing cold in the middle of winter without one. It also implies that her mother suffers from alcohol abuse. Then it is also revealed that one time her mother packed her lunch with only a few crackers, moist towelettes, and a can of shaving cream. And when she was just 3 years old, Helga would have to walk to school by herself in the rain because her parents were too focused on her sister and forgot to take her to school. That's an extremely sad backstory. Starting off this countdown, we have Numberjacks. You all kept mentioning this one in the comments in my last video. Boy, do I regret looking it up. So Numberjacks is a British 3D animated children's show. It's aimed towards 2 to 5-year-olds. And it's about a bunch of numbers that solve problems and go on adventures. Pretty educational and harmless, right? Well, yeah, except for the fact that the characters are really, really creepy. The Numberjacks alone will give you nightmares with their beady little eyes. But what's even more terrifying are the villains of the show, which they are referred to as the meanies. So first up, we have Spooky Spoon, which lives up to its name. Then you have the Shape Japer, which is this creepy purple ball with a permanent angry face plastered on it. It has this evil grin with sharp teeth. Then you have the Puzzler, which, okay, he isn't that bad, but he's a floating human head. And lastly, you have the Problem Blob, which is like a slime monster. And he has one eye, but it's located in his mouth, and it comes out on his long tongue. Creepy.
Number 9. Terrahawks. I'm so happy I grew up in the anime era and not the era where people thought kids wanted to watch shows where the stars were nightmarish marionette puppets. Terrahawks was a show about a group of space cops that defended Earth from an alien invasion. The funny thing about this show is that it starts with NASA having a base on Mars in the year 2020. Guys are just a little off. But the disturbing thing about this show is the villain, Zelda. She's basically the scariest puppet I've ever seen. She looks like a rotting old woman that is waiting for you to fall asleep so she can suck your life force out or bake you into a cake. In what kind of dark future did we let people get this ugly? Also, over the next few weeks, every time someone mentions Zelda, I'm not gonna think about an amazing game series, but a cross between The Simpsons Crazy Cat Lady and Team America World Police. I don't want to.
In our 8th spot, we have Phineas and Ferb, a goofy little show about 2 inventor brothers and their super agent pet, Platypus Perry. So in the show, Candace is always trying to get her brothers in trouble by trying to get her parents to witness their inventions, but she never succeeds. Well, it makes her seem like she's a pathological liar. Then in season 1, episode 45, she finally succeeds and her parents catch Phineas and Ferb in the act. As a result, they get sent to reformatory school. Now, this is when the show takes a very dark turn. At this school, the brothers get their imaginations forcibly removed from them. They go through this very disturbing brainwashing process where you see this machine strapped to their head, basically sucking the life out of them. Then we see that they're strapped down with their eyes forced open as they watch this show about how imagination is morally wrong. The worst part, this whole episode was a dark metaphor for growing up. In our 7th spot, we have the real Ghostbusters. Yes, our classic movie had a cartoon as well. This was a 1986 show filled with terrifying monsters. If this show was still around today, you know there would be tons of moms complaining about it, saying it's not appropriate for the kids, blah blah. Okay, Karen. So let's talk about some of these creepy monsters. So up first we have Akira. This is the demon version of a Mesopotamian goddess of disease and death. She basically wants to create chaos through disease. Her appearance is disgusting, with a shriveled green zombie-looking face with worm-type creatures for hands. Each worm has its own face with a tongue with sharp spikes on it. Akira would then infect other individuals, which causes them to get big boils on them. These boils were in fact her offspring. Then you have Vathek and his pals. Vathek is a big blob-type butcher creature with a buzzsaw in his head. His friend Grizzle is shown with his mouth sewn shut and dentist drills for hands. And then you have Corpsicle, a big blob with no face and just hands for eyes. In our 6th spot, we have Pinky and the Brain. Again, I'm sure most of you have at least heard of this show. It's basically about an evil genius mouse and his not-so-intelligent sidekick. Every night they try to conquer the world. Now, there are several disturbing episodes. One episode I want to talk about is the first episode from season 4 titled Brainwashed, Brain Go Away. This episode features a very creepy looking evil clown. Basically in the episode, the clown makes these balloon animals that pop and release a gas that knocks Pinky and the Brain out. The Brain then has super weird dreams. Everything is in black and white and looks and sounds distorted. It's a mind trip. At one point, he holds onto a globe in his hands and then just turns into black goo and melts away. And of course, throughout many of the episodes, you see Brain wanting to hurt his dumb sidekick. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Zombiedom. This 2015 show follows a bunch of zombie kids that gather the streets at night. These zombies aren't the brightest and get themselves into a bunch of silly situations. Now, first off, there's an episode called All I See Is Hannah, where a character finds a strange-looking mushroom on the ground and eats it. From there, he goes on a trip and his eyes become swirly and purple. So basically, he was on drugs. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is the character Hannah. Hannah is the sole human survivor of the zombie virus. Which is sad because she's the only kid left and she got no family. But the truly terrifying thing about her is her appearance. In the first couple of seasons, she had a big round face with 2 unproportionally small, all black, beady little eyes. She also has a huge gummy smile with only 1 tooth just hanging out. I mean, her proportions are just all wrong. Tell me how, out of all the zombies and creatures in the show, the dang human looks the scariest. In our 4th spot, we have Braceface. Does anyone else remember the show? If not, Braceface is a Canadian cartoon that surrounds the 14-year-old girl Sharon Spitz and her struggles of growing up. Sharon was actually voiced by Alicia Silverstone for the first 2 seasons. Now, Braceface has dealt with much more serious issues on the show, such as peer pressure, body image issues, and even underage drinking. So let's take a look at that last one. In season 1, episode 13, Sharon and her friend Maria go to Miami to visit Sharon's dad. During this trip, Sharon and Maria are invited to go to a party by a friend of her dad's band. At the party, this guy offers both the minors a rum and coke. That's right, they mention that in a kids show. After insisting that they drink, Sharon gives into the pressure and has some. Then you see Sharon continue drinking and has 5 more. With the alcohol in her system, she starts to dance and actually shakes her tushy for all the guys to see. Then she ends up back at the hotel where she vomits. And her dad gives her this big long lecture about underage drinking. I mean, I personally haven't seen a kid or tween show tackle dark issues like that. Making our way down the list at number 3, we have What a Cartoon. This is an American show composed of a variety of animated shorts. Let's look at the one titled Kitchen Casanova. In this episode, a man is preparing a dinner for his date. Seems pretty innocent, but that's until he reveals what he actually made for his date. It's quite disturbing. Basically, he was going to serve her a rolled up tongue with an eyeball, bloody bones, and a severed human foot. It's quite a disturbing image. And a bunch of other episodes have dark plots and images like this one. This show scared a lot of kids and outraged numerous parents. In our second spot, we have SpongeBob. Yes, I know you wouldn't think that this show would be on the list since it's about a cheerful little sponge, but there are numerous episodes that are quite scary. Let's start off with the episode where SpongeBob thinks he kills the health inspector, and then him and Mr. Krabs literally have to dispose of his body, which goes terribly wrong, and they just keep moving and hiding the body so that the cops don't catch them. Don't worry, turns out he wasn't dead, but it's still pretty terrifying. Or how about the hash-slinging slasher episode? When SpongeBob and Squidward work the night shift and believe they are visited by a dead fry cook with a rusty spatula as a hand. Or the episode where SpongeBob gets injected by snail plasma and slowly turns into this creepy looking snail. There are so many more episodes that I can name, like when SpongeBob gets a splinter and turns into this huge weeping red sword. The list goes on and on. The Hooky episode, oh my gosh.
Number 1. Ren and Stimpy. This one is definitely the granddaddy of them all. Ren and Stimpy had it all. Gore, violence, suggestive themes, banned episodes. The creator of the show eventually got fired from Nickelodeon for taking the show too far. If you've never seen Ren and Stimpy, it's about a cartoon dog and his friend, and the two of them do some of the goriest things I've ever seen animated. More than once in the show, a random character will take a cheese grater and shred a part of their body. The two main characters were so unstable, they both show signs of several mental disorders, and this show was hated by parents all over North America. I know it because when I was a kid, it was the one show my parents wouldn't let me watch, so I would have to sneak it whenever they weren't home.
Starting off this countdown, we have Dexter's Lab. This show is about a child genius who creates inventions in his secret laboratory. In one episode titled Got Your Goat, Dexter and Dee Dee travel to South America to look for the chupacabra that escaped from his lab. In one scene, we see them explore a cave when they find a backpack. Inside the backpack were binoculars covered in fresh, dripping blood and a human skull. So basically, Dexter's creation killed someone. But they played the scene off as just a joke. Then in the episode titled Dee Dee's Room, you see a zombified Dexter with pulsating veins all over his face. It's quite a creepy image. And lastly, you have the episode titled Sore Eyes. In this episode, Dexter gets laser eye surgery, but it goes horribly right. He can now see every minute detail, like the bacteria and bugs that infest our food. And in our 9th spot, we have Miss Spider's Sunny Patch Friends. Oh, based on the title, it sounds like it should be like a pretty, sweet, innocent cartoon, right? Well, let's look at the characters in the show. You have Bounce, this blue character with a massive smile and orange eyes with orange eyelashes. Then you have Dragon, a dragonfly with long, sharp eyelashes and blue eyes. Honestly, just you gotta look at their pictures. They're pretty terrifying. But the worst character would have to be Spiderus, a white spider with a weird human head and red lips. Then you have his wife that literally looks like the devil. Like, what's with these characters? They're all terrifying looking.
Number 8. Are you afraid of the dark? If you didn't grow up in Canada, then you don't remember a group of preteens sitting around a campfire ready to share ghost stories. Are You Afraid of the Dark was a kids horror show that would take live action looks at different haunted tales. It was like Twilight Zone for kids. The episodes would have all different kinds of themes crossing different eras. Some would lean more into the supernatural, where others would be more along the lines of science fiction. As a kid, the show would scare me so bad. I remember my mom and sister bugging me about how I was afraid of the I'm Cold episode. But now looking back, it just seems like a lot of budget bad 90s acting. Some things were not meant to be revisited.
Moving on to number 7, we have Freaky Stories. This is a Canadian animated show that is a collection of urban legends and other scary stories. It's hosted by two animatronic puppets, a cockroach and a maggot. But that's not the creepy part. The show has pretty creepy stories. One of them is about a man who spends the night at a motel. When he lays down on his mattress, he feels like a bunch of tiny little fingers were massaging his body. I mean, that's not so bad, getting a little free massage. But when he ripped open the mattress, he found that it was filled with hundreds of cockroaches. Then there's another episode that talks about a vain young woman that refused to wash her hair because she didn't want to ruin her hairdo. Her hair was up in like a beehive type style, and she wanted to keep it perfectly in place. Then, eventually, she mysteriously passed away. Upon investigating her death, it was said that a spider was living in her hair, hatched eggs, and then she died from a bunch of spider bites. And then there are just countless other creepy stories that are featured in this show. Moving on to number 6, we have Tales from the Crypt Keeper. I'm sure all of you 90s kids remember this show. I certainly do. Alright, so the Crypt Keeper plays the host of the show who introduces what each episode is going to be about. The series then goes on and talks about classic legends like stories of vampires, zombies, and werewolves. But a lot of the episodes have scary monsters that scare the human characters. Let's talk about the two most frightening episodes in my opinion. Starting off, we have the episode titled The Weeping Woman, where Camille and Mildred visit a haunted Victorian mansion. At night, they are woken up by creepy moaning and objects flying around. That's when they see the Weeping Woman, an old eyeless and toothless woman with scraggly gray hair and long black nails. The second night, the woman looks even more terrifying with red glowing eyes. She ends up chasing the girls around the house, not to mention chasing one of the girls to the top of the roof where she almost gets pushed off to death. Then you have the other episode titled Sharon Share-alike. This is an episode about a girl named Shauna who refuses to share her toys with her little sister Katie. As a result, she hides one of her old toy dolls in the vent so her sister can't play with it. Then the doll ends up coming alive and haunting her. The episode is really creepy, with the doll coming alive and saying things like, "You're not nice, I don't like you." The doll ends up chasing her all over the house, giggling and chanting her name. Move over, Annabelle, okay? We got a more terrifying doll here. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy is another classic cartoon. This time, this show is known to be more dark and twisted. In the episode titled Stimpy's Fan Club, Ren and Stimpy receive a bunch of fan mail, however, it's all for Stimpy and none for Ren. That night, Ren goes completely insane from the jealousy. He stays awake talking to himself, and he feels guilty for writing letters back insulting the fans. The episode continues with him planning to murder Stimpy in his sleep by snapping his neck. His brain then begins to sting and swell before he is engulfed by the flames of hell. In another episode titled Rubber Nipple Salesman, Ren and Stimpy own a rubber nipple business and go door to door to sell their product. They knock on the door to one house and a horse answers the door. This horse is clearly a deranged killer. He ends up looking at them and saying, "Maybe I should make another mistake. Maybe 2 more." Then he pulls out a walrus and asks if they have any rubber walrus protectors. The walrus begs them to call the police. Okay, it's actually pretty hilarious, but it's also very creepy.
Number 4. Junior Christian Science Bible Lesson. After 20 seconds of watching the show, you're gonna be begging me to put on some Veggie Tales. The Junior Christian Science Bible Lesson is probably one of the worst named shows of all times and stars puppets with eyes deader than Lindsay Lohan's acting career. It was a cable access show to help kids learn about the Bible, and I'm guessing whatever the Bible constitutes as science. It would have some made up Christian songs along with some old classics. Something that's really throwing me off about the show is that there's 2 main characters, both of which that are puppets. One is a human man and the other is a green alien. Do Christians believe in aliens? I've never been to church, so I'm not sure what the rules are, but I thought Scientologists and girls who buy crystals were the only ones who pray to the stars.
Moving on to number 3, we have Sesame Street. Yes, I know I've done videos on Sesame Street before, but those are all just made up theories. Now it's time to look at actual facts from episodes. So Sesame Street over the years has tackled serious issues like death, disease, divorce, and gender inequality. Recently, they have introduced a new character named Carly, whose mother is a drug addict. As a result, she lives in foster care. Carly is supposed to highlight the serious impact that a drug addiction can have on a family and a young child. Sesame Street also claims that it's a way to help break the stigma and to help show kids that they're not alone. Then we also have the character named Alex, whose father is in jail. And we have Lily, a 7-year-old Muppet whose family suffers from food insecurity and homelessness. Sesame Street is just filled with hard-hitting issues. Moving on to number 2, we have Jimmy Neutron. Wow, who else remembers this show? That is a throwback. Also, who remembers that weird Fairly OddParents and Jimmy Neutron crossover that they did? It was just so random. But anyways, this is another show that seems harmless and not scary, but upon analyzing it, you notice how dark it truly is. In one episode, Jimmy duplicates his friends and family, but they turn evil. His dad is the creepiest as he sadistically laughs while he recounts how he killed and mounted ducks all over his wall after they begged for mercy. In the episode titled One of Us, Jimmy is alone while his best friends turn into mindless zombies. In the episode Who's Your Mommy, Carl gets impregnated by a single alien egg. Creepy. And lastly, there's one episode where Jimmy's dad buys a puppet named Flippy to practice ventriloquism with. Jimmy ends up putting a computer chip in Flippy's head to enhance Hugh's brain so he will tell better jokes. But it ends up just sucking all the life out of him so that Flippy becomes real and his dad is like lifeless. And he even planned to kill his dad by chucking his body off a cliff so that he would never be able to get his brain back. That's really dark. And in our number 1 spot, we have Invader Zim. This show is basically about the alien Zim that gets tricked into coming down to Earth, where he now resides, disguising himself as a human child. Now, there are numerous episodes that are very dark and disturbing. In the episode titled Bestest Friend, Zim gives a kid a gift, and inside is a robotic arm that comes out and literally gouges out the kid's eyeballs. Then, it replaces them with robotic eyes. While his eyes are being removed, you can hear him screaming in pain. But the most disturbing episode would have to be the one titled Dark Harvest, which is the 4th episode in season 1. In this episode, Zim gets sent down to the nurse's office. Then Dib says that when he gets examined by the nurse, she will discover that he has no human organs. This will reveal his alien identity. So, how does Zim go about solving this problem? He goes around stealing organs from kids. Like, he literally rips their organs and replaces it with just random items. This makes all the kids start to become sick and they start acting all funny. Zim then puts the organs in himself so he appears human. But he ends up turning into this huge blob of just stolen organs. It's really gross. In fact, he throws up someone's intestines and then he just slurps them back in as if it's spaghetti. It's really disturbing.
Number 10, Dirt Girl World. This show is about a girl who runs around in what seems to be an abandoned junkyard looking for things in the dirt. Now, the show is not scary because it teaches kids terrible hygiene habits, but because they're giant, strange heads and faces. They all look like their faces are peering in from the wrong side of a magnifying glass. Their creepy, distorted faces look like something that would be looking at you from your window while you're having a horrible fever dream. Every time I look at one of these things, I keep picturing that annoying orange.
Hey Apple! Hey Apple!
It took me a while to figure out why I find these creations so unsettling, and it's because they've taken human features and slapped them on top of cartoon faces. Every character in this cartoon looks like they should be on the Cursed Images subreddit.
Moving on to number 9, we have SpongeBob. So I know I already talked about everyone's favorite little yellow sponge before, but I want to go into more detail this time. This show isn't just about a silly little sponge and his daily adventures. It shows characters dealing with depression, anxiety, and mania, and even addresses issues like greed, suicide, and vengeance. Let's take a look at one of the episodes titled One Course Meal. In this episode, Mr. Krabs discovers that Plankton is terrified of whales, and then he uses this to his advantage to torture him. It is revealed that Plankton's ancestors were killed by whales. Now, Mr. Krabs tortures Plankton so much that he actually tries to commit suicide. We see him lay down in the middle of the road waiting for a bus to run him over. Or how about the episode where SpongeBob believes he kills the health inspector and then him and Mr. Krabs struggle to try and hide his body from the cops? Definitely darker than a bunch of us realized. In our 8th spot, we have Happy Tree Friends. Okay, yes, I know, the show is technically not made for young kids, but I know a lot of kids that watch this show. Now, Don't be fooled by the name of the show, it's clearly not bright and cheery. The characters are pretty cute and colorful, so you would think it's just a normal kids show. No. The whole show is about woodland creatures that get into very disturbing and graphic situations. In each episode, the characters get severely injured or killed. It's just filled with gore and violence. For example, you see the characters getting hit and killed by a truck, being chopped in half by a ceiling fan, being burnt alive, decapitated by elevator doors, and sawed in half. The list goes on and on. So yeah, it's designed to be a dark comedy, but it's more creepy than funny. Moving on to number 7, we have the Inhumanoids. This is a 1986 show about human scientists that battle a bunch of subterranean monsters known as the Inhumanoids. This show is also filled with very creepy, evil characters. Some of the characters include Decompose, a giant dude that has control over the dead. He is seen with a giant cage built into his stomach that's often spewing blood. He can also turn living things into zombie monsters by just touching them. Then you have Tendril, basically a green giant dude that can regenerate his long tentacle-like arms and legs. And then you have the Redwoods character that are creepy red trees with glowing eyes that look like they came out of Evil Dead.
Number 6, Jigsaw. Let's do a jump across the pond and take a look at a 1980s children's show called Jigsaw. For the most part, the show is pretty normal, except for the demonic looking freak of nature, Mr. Nosybunk. This tuxedo-wearing terror looks like he can smell every inch of fear he induces into the public. His pale face and suit make him look like he went to the Slender Man school of fashion. Not to mention the gigantic grin he's got ripping across his face. That paired with his gigantic eyes give off an expression that he can't wait to turn your body into furniture. Not only does this guy look like a creep, his hobby is growing more Nosybunk clones in a greenhouse. So that means there could be more than just one of these freaks running around on the loose. No thank you.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Ed, and Eddie. This show follows the lives of 3 boys, all with basically the same name, but with completely different personalities. It's sad, but if you rewatch the show, it's clear to see that each Ed suffers from a different kind of abuse. Let's start off with Ed with 1D. Ed lives in an abusive house. He lives in the dark basement in a really messy room. But his sister's room is clean and filled with nicer items, showing parental favoritism. Ed also has bad personal hygiene. It's as if his parents don't care for his own health or hygiene. Then in one episode, you can hear someone screaming in the background. Ed then says, "Dad's home." Okay, that literally makes it seem like his dad abuses others and he's just used to hearing them scream and cry in pain. Then lastly, in one episode, Eddie tries to break Ed out of his house when they realize that the stairs are gone, meaning his parents physically removed the stairs so that he had no way to get out of the basement. That's dark. Now, let's move on to Double D Ed. His abuse is more in the form of neglect. His parents are hardly ever home, so they communicate to him through sticky notes. But the notes are often outrageous, like, "Please wash the phone." Not a typical chore, at least not in my household. It makes it seem like his mom may be struggling with personal issues. Then it also seems like Ed is given a bunch of chores to do as if he's a servant and not their son. And lastly, we have Eddie. In the series finale, we saw Eddie being physically and verbally abused by his older brother. So the characters do suffer from a much darker life than we thought. And our 4th spot, we have Courage the Cowardly Dog. Yes, I know I've talked about Courage so much on this channel, but it's freaking creepy. One of the episodes that scared me as a kid was the one titled King Ramses' Curse. That's right, the Egyptian pharaoh makes an appearance in this episode. So Eustace ends up finding and keeping an ancient Egyptian slab. As a result, he's visited by King Ramses. King Ramses just appears outside their home and he's swaying back and forth. He's like, "Return the slab." Okay, now it's funny, but back when I was a kid, it was terrifying. That alone could just send shivers down your spine. Then you have the episode Freaky Fred, where Mariel's cousin Fred comes into town to visit. Fred looks insane with his creepy wide-mouthed smile and slanted eyebrows. What's even worse is that he has creepy inner dialogue that only the audience can hear. And it's entirely in rhymes. Let's not forget about the episode where Muriel gets possessed. Or how about the episode where that glowing white human face visits their home? All are perfect examples of how disturbing that show really was. But it's also a really good show, can't lie.
Number 3, The Wacky Adventures of Ronald McDonald. What's even worse than having the main character of a kids show a creepy marionette doll? Well, why not a clown? The Wacky Adventures of Ronald McDonald starred the Clown Prince of Crime running around the world doing crazy things. Now I know the Clown Prince of Crime is actually the Joker, but who's really more threatening? I wonder what kind of wacky adventures they got up to. Like, hey, today let's spread childhood diabetes, yay! There wasn't just Ronald on the show, but there was also his misfit gang of McDonald's mascots, like the Hamburglar and Grimace. The part of this show that makes it scary is just the idea that McDonald's found another way to make their borderline toxic waste more appealing to kids.
In our second spot, we have Over the Garden Wall. I am so glad that I found this show. It's pretty good. So this show is about two half-brothers that are trying to find their way home as they're wandering through a forest. Along their way, they encounter a variety of creepy creatures. First, we have the Beast, who is the main antagonist in the series. If you think about it, he's a metaphor for lost souls, suicide, and hopelessness. He is a tall, humanoid creature with antlers. In the light, we see that his body is made out of elderwood with twisted, distorted faces all over his body. And guess what? You know how elderwood is made? Basically, it's made from people who have gotten lost in the forest and then they just gave up. Roots start growing from their bodies until they turn into a tree with a horrified look on their face. Then they are cut down and turned into oil to fuel the beast's lanterns. That's pretty dark. And lastly, you have the character Lorna. Spoiler alert. It's revealed that she's possessed with a cannibalistic demon. And in our number one spot, we have the show Grisly Tales for Gruesome Kids. This show is about terrible kids receiving cruel and gruesome punishments for their behavior. Honestly, it's a good way to scare your kids into behaving nicely. In one episode titled Death by Chocolate, it surrounds this greedy girl who we see indulging in tons of chocolate. She's also quite rude to her sister, often calling her a slave. Well, she gets instant karma as a fly ends up laying an egg in her chocolate bunny. She ends up eating a maggot, and as a result, she turns into a giant fly, in which her sister kills, and then chocolate just spews everywhere. Like, that's terrifying. She literally killed her sister. Next, we have the episode The Spaghetti Man. Basically, it's about a bunch of picky eaters who then get captured by the Spaghetti Man. The Spaghetti Man then turns the kids into spaghetti and eats them for dinner. At the end of the episode, it's implied that a family ate their own son for dinner since he got turned into lasagna noodles. And then they're shown eating the lasagna. Like, is that even considered cannibalism? I don't even know. Starting off this countdown, we have the Fairly OddParents. This show has been a fairly, get it, big success with 10 seasons. And it's the show that I would watch every day after school. But I never regarded it as being dark. That was until I really took time to analyze it. So let's start off with the theme song. Timmy is an average kid that no one understands. Mom and Dad and Vicky always giving him commands. Bed twerp. Right there, that suggests that Timmy is constantly being bossed around by his parents. And in the show, he's constantly abused by his sadistic babysitter, Vicky. She often degrades him and calls him names. Then it continues with doom and gloom up in his room. So Timmy's room isn't even a safe place for him to escape to. Now, Timmy then gets fairies, which makes his life relatively better. The Fairy Council claims that they grant fairies to the most miserable children on Earth, meaning that there are a bunch of depressed and abused children out there that feel ignored and mistreated by their parents. In our ninth spot, we have Tom and Jerry. I'm sure you all remember this classic show involving Tom the house cat and Jerry the cute little mouse. Now, you wouldn't regard this show as scary. However, I searched online and there have been multiple people that have been horrified by certain episodes. For starters, in the episode titled Down and Outing, High Stakes and Sorry Safari, Tom's owner is very loud and short-tempered. He constantly beats Tom and enjoys doing so as he always has this creepy grin on his face. Then in the episode titled Heavenly Puss, Tom literally gets sent to hell. That episode in particular creeped out The Simpsons creator Matt Groening. He said that it's one of the darkest things he has seen. And that's coming from The Simpsons creator, and The Simpsons has some really messed up stuff happen. Then you have the episode titled Blue Cat Blues, where depressed Tom and Jerry sit on the train tracks right as a train is coming. Tom's face is pretty disturbing looking, with his eyeballs having bulging, prominent veins. And lastly, in the episode titled The Two Mouseketeers, Tom gets guillotined at the end of the episode. Moving on to number 8, we have Real Monsters. Okay, I never watched the show as a kid, and I'm happy I didn't. You'll understand in a second. So this show is about a group of monsters in training. Ickis, Oblina, and Crumb are all monsters who attend a school to learn how to frighten humans. Kind of sounds like Monsters University and Monsters Inc. once I think about it. Now let's take a look at the design of these monsters. They are so creepy and you cannot convince me otherwise. So let's start with Ickis. Probably the least scary looking one. Ickis is like a little gremlin with a wide Cheshire cat smile. But his eyes turn red and his teeth turn sharp when he scares people. Then we have Oblina. She's like an evil black and white candy cane looking creature. But take a look at her beady little glowing green eyes and huge lips and mouth. Oblina is like a serpent type creature that can contort her body. She can use her teeth, lips, and tongue to scare people. Then you have the scariest one of all, Crumb. This naked looking monster. He literally has detached eyes, so he's always stuck holding them up in the air. And he's covered in hair and it just looks super disturbing. His scare tactic is to use his grossness to frighten humans. Well, they succeeded with that. So yeah, the creatures alone make this show terrifying. I would be shocked if it left a lot of kids scarred. Coming in our 7th spot, we have the Rugrats. This show revolves around 4 babies, Tommy, Chucky, and the twins Phil and Lil. And of course, Angelica, their older cousin that often likes to terrorize them. In fact, she is famous for screaming, "You stupid babies." Meanwhile, the adults are completely clueless. Well, that's great. The babies have a verbally abusive cousin, but I'm not going to focus on that. There was one episode that made the show take a very sad and dark turn. This episode was titled Mother's Day and reveals what happened to Chucky's mom. In the episode, everyone has a mom for Mother's Day except for Chucky. Then it's revealed that his mom died from an unexpected terminal illness shortly after his birth. It's an extremely heartbreaking episode. And then also in the episode, Chucky's father reads a poem that Chucky's mom wrote for him while in the hospital. Like, ugh, just ripped my heart out there. Poor Chucky. In our 6th spot, we have Adventure Time. Although the show itself isn't considered dark, there are some underlying dark themes and some episodes that are pretty creepy. One episode in particular, you see the Ice King cut body parts off of princesses and then he sews them back together to form one princess, like Frankenstein. Or the episode with the blank-eyed girls. They are so creepy. They just stand there and stare at people for no reason. They are all identical with long black hair and all black, soulless eyes. The show has other creepy moments like the episode titled A Glitch is a Glitch, where Finn and Jake receive a floppy disk. On the disc is a video of a girl gagging herself with her own hair. You got other creepy characters like the Guardian Angel that seems all innocent and saves Finn's life, and then it's revealed that she's this hideous monster with wrinkly green skin, nasty teeth, and bulging eyeballs. One episode in particular though that made a lot of people uncomfortable is the one titled No One Can Hear You. If you've seen this episode, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. The whole episode makes you feel really uneasy, and then the whole... Only the ones that watch that episode will understand what I'm referring to.
Number 5. IE Yoga. When you were a kid, I bet you would sit around all day thinking, man, I wish I could just learn some yoga right now. No kid has ever been jonesing for some yoga. That's not a thing. So I have no idea how this show got passed. It's about a 50-something-year-old man teaching kids yoga with his chicken mascot sidekick who's Jamaican for some reason. Now the part of the show that creeps me out is about how often this guy helps these kids get into poses by getting hands-on. Why is this a show? Why did parents let their kids be on this show? Who is this old man? All of this makes me so uncomfortable, so I'm just gonna move on.
Coming in at number 4, we have The Magic School Bus. What a great educational show filled with moments of adult humor. Again, another show you wouldn't consider terrifying, but let me prove you wrong. So in one of the episodes, Arnold literally commits suicide. In this episode, Miss Frizzle takes her class to space. They're on Pluto and Arnold is having an argument with his cousin Janet. She basically wants to stay on Pluto, but he says this will happen if she stays on Pluto. He then takes off his helmet and freezes immediately. Janet then carries his dead frozen body back to the school bus. Of course, he didn't actually die, he was alive in the next episode. But he literally ended his life to prove a point. Then there are other weird things that happen, like when they go inside of Ralphie through his nasty, pussy, bloody scab, and then they all get attacked by his cells and the bacteria. Or when Miss Frizzle takes the kids to learn about the weather and Ralphie opens up the school bus when they're flying in the air and they all turn into weird flat humans, like super thin, paper thin humans. They just fly through the sky. In our third spot, we have Martin Mystery. Another one of my favorite cartoons as a child, although certain episodes definitely scared me. So this show surrounds Martin Mystery and Diana Lombard, two 16-year-old step-siblings that work for an organization referred to as the Center. Basically, their job is to solve cases and protect people from supernatural threats. There are multiple episodes that are completely messed up. The one I remember giving me nightmares when I was younger is the episode titled Revenge of the Doppelganger. Basically, in this episode, women are being attacked by some sort of electrical shadow that completely erases their face. In the episode, this creature attacks multiple women that all have similar features and steals their faces, leaving them looking like creepy mannequins. Or how about the episode The Nightmare of the Coven, where 3 students used a book of spells and released this witch demon thing. The witch ends up turning more of the female students into witches. They all look terrifying with their sharp teeth and green skin. And then we have the episode The Body Swappers, which is a reference to the movie The Thing. Basically, this organism creature goes around using humans as its hosts. In the episode, whoever the organism gets to turns them into big monsters with sharp teeth and long tentacles. And there are plenty of other horrifying creatures seen throughout the series that will definitely give you the creep. In our second spot, we have The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. A classic show that is very well written and actually hilarious, and I still enjoy watching it to this day. So there are 2 main episodes that I want to discuss. The first one being the episode titled Health and Fitness, which was season 2, episode 34. In this episode, London and Maddie go to extreme measures to make sure their bodies look perfect for a fashion show. London is shown trying to lose an extreme amount of weight, whereas Maddie thinks that she needs to gain weight. This episode tackles the eating disorders, anorexia, and bulimia. But as a kid, it went right over our heads. London ends up starving herself to the point where she's super dizzy, and Maddie has digestive issues after binge eating all day. Now, the next episode I want to talk about is titled Rich Girl, and it's from season 1, episode 13. In this episode, we find the very upsetting truth about London's childhood. So basically, in this episode, London's father goes broke, and as a result, London loses her place and has to live with Maddie. That's only temporary though, he's still rich, don't worry. While at Maddie's, she says she didn't realize that families actually sat down and ate meals together. She said that her parents would often go out to restaurants and would leave her home with a nanny. But the nannies never spoke English, so she was often alone with no one to talk to. Also, the nanny was never the same, so it's not like she could have formed a bond with them. It's almost like having a new stranger in your house every day. Then in the episode, London fails at her attempt to try and cook. Well, it's because no one taught her how to cook. Then she also says that every weekend she was stuck flying back and forth between her mom and dad. So she didn't really have a good childhood. Side note, the episode about the ghost in Suite 613 would always scare me as a kid. Do any of you guys know what I'm talking about? Let me know in the comments below.